What would you do if your family canceled your dream engagement party, not because of money, but because they thought your fiancé was trash? Emily Parker's heart shattered when her parents tore apart her perfect night, only to throw a lavish bash for her sister at the same venue a week later, until a stranger at that party revealed a secret that turned her world upside down. Was her fiancé Mike Tran hiding a past dark enough to destroy them both? Or was he the key to her redemption? Dive into Riverside Requiem to find out. Subscribe now and help us hit 1,000 subscribers first. What would you do if your family canceled your dream engagement party, not because of money, but because they thought your fiancé was trash? Emily Parker's heart shattered when her parents tore apart her perfect night, only to throw a lavish bash for her sister at the same venue a week later, until a stranger at that party revealed a secret that turned her world upside down. Was her fiancé Mike Tran hiding a past dark enough to destroy them both? Or was he the key to her redemption? Dive into Riverside Requiem to find out. Subscribe now and help us hit 1,000 subscribers first. Emily Parker stood frozen in the hallway of her architectural firm, her phone pressed so hard against her ear that her knuckles whitened. The hum of Cincinnati's skyline buzzed faintly through the window, but all she could hear was her mother's voice, calm, practiced, and cutting like a blade. "We canceled the reservation, dear," Linda Carter said, as if she were discussing a dinner order gone wrong. "The Riverside Terrace was simply too expensive, and your father and I decided it's not worth it for this." "For this?" Emily's voice cracked, her breath catching in her throat. She stepped away from her desk, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floor, searching for a quiet corner where no one could see the storm brewing in her chest. "Mom, the engagement party is this Saturday. We sent out invitations weeks ago. I've dreamed of celebrating there since I was 16. You know that." "Dreams need to align with reality, Emily," Linda replied, her tone dripping with that maddening patience she used to deliver bad news. "We've found a charming little restaurant back room instead. It'll be perfectly suitable." Emily's face flushed, heat rising like a wildfire. "We already put down a deposit. How much could you possibly save by canceling now?" A pause hung heavy on the line. A telling, suffocating silence. Then Linda spoke again, her voice softening into something almost pitying. "It's not just about the money, dear. It's about setting reasonable expectations for your future. With Mike's background, perhaps it's better to start modest." The implication hit Emily like a punch to the gut. Mike Tran, her fiancé, the man she loved with every fiber of her being, wasn't good enough. Not for the Parker family, not for the pristine lawns of Amberley Village, not for the glittering Riverside Terrace overlooking the Ohio River. She ended the call with a curt, "We'll talk later," her promise hollow. She knew the decision was final, carved in stone by her parents' unshakable judgment. At 29, Emily had spent her adult life carving a path away from the shadow of her family's wealth. Her father, James Jim Carter, ruled Cincinnati's commercial real estate scene, a king on a throne built from golf course handshakes and charity gala smiles. Her mother, Linda, reigned over the city's cultural boards, ensuring the Parker name glittered in society columns. Emily could have had it all, a corner office at Carter Properties, a trust fund to cushion every fall. But she'd said no. She'd clawed her way up at a small firm designing sustainable buildings, bought a modest condo with her own money, and fallen for Mike Tran, a software developer who wore worn jeans and drove a 15-year-old Honda that purred like a dream. Mike was brilliant, kind, and unpretentious, qualities rarer than gold in her parents' world. They'd met at a tech conference where she'd presented on smart building design. He'd ask sharp, thoughtful questions, his dark eyes glinting with curiosity behind a plain button-down shirt. Hours later, over coffee in a cramped shop, she'd realized she'd found someone real. 6 months after that, he'd proposed, with a simple ring he'd designed himself, a tiny circuit pattern etched into the band. Her parents had offered tepid smiles and a suggestion for a long engagement, code for hoping she'd ditch him for someone appropriate. Now, as she slumped back at her desk, her phone buzzed with a text from her sister, Sarah Parker. "Mom just told me about Riverside. So sorry, Em, but a silver lining. She's upgrading my birthday venue to make up for the family embarrassment. Isn't that great? Emily stared at the words, reading them 3 times before they sank in. The Riverside Terrace? A Riverside Terrace? Wasn't canceled for cost. It was canceled because her parents were ashamed of Mike. Of her choice. Of her. Sarah's birthday was the weekend after her would-be engagement party. Growing up, Emily had watched Sarah thrive in the Parker mold. 2 years younger, polished to perfection, dating men like Ethan Brooks, the son of a banking dynasty her parents adored. Sarah chased a law degree, not for passion but for approval, becoming the daughter their parents wanted. Predictable, pliable, a mirror of their values. Emily had chosen differently, volunteering in college to design community centers, rejecting her mother's sorority, turning down her father's job offer. She'd thought they respected her independence, even if they didn't get it. Now, she wasn't so sure. The first time Mike met her parents had been a disaster veiled in politeness. Over dinner at their sprawling Amberley Village estate, James had grilled him about his state school scholarship and his middle-class roots. His father a high school teacher, his mother a nurse. Linda had whispered later, "At least he's resourceful." As if frugality were a quirk she was generously overlooking. Emily had brushed it off, believing they'd warmed to him. But this was war. Her mind raced as she walked home that evening, the Cincinnati skyline fading into dusk. She'd wanted one night. One perfect night where her worlds could collide, her family, her friends, Mike's quiet strength, all framed by the Riverside's floor-to-ceiling windows and shimmering chandeliers. Now it was gone, snatched away with barely a week's notice. Worse, Sarah's text gnawed at her. Family embarrassment. What did that even mean? Was there more they weren't telling her? When she reached her condo, Mike was there, hunched over his laptop, his dark hair falling into his eyes. "Hey, you okay?" he asked, looking up with that gentle concern that always melted her. She forced a smile, not ready to unload the day's wreckage. "Fine, just family stuff." He nodded, but his gaze lingered, like he could see the cracks she was hiding. Later, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, a question gnawed at her. Mike never talked much about his past, just snippets about coding in his dorm, scholarships, late-night coffee runs. What if there was something he wasn't telling her? Something her parents knew. The thought twisted in her gut, sharp and cold. Tomorrow, she'd go to Amberley Village. She'd confront James and Linda, demand the truth about the party, about Mike, about everything. But, as sleep eluded her, Sarah's cryptic, "I'm sorry," echoed in her mind. What couldn't Sarah say? And why did it feel like the ground beneath her was about to give way? The drive to Amberley Village felt like a march to the gallows. Emily Parker gripped the steering wheel of her beat-up Toyota, the Cincinnati skyline shrinking in her rearview mirror as tree-lined streets gave way to the manicured lawns of her childhood. The Parker estate loomed ahead, a sprawling colonial with white columns and ivy creeping up the walls like secrets clinging to silence. She hadn't slept, her mind replaying her mother's words. With Mike's background, perhaps it's better to start modestly. What did they know about Mike Tran that she didn't? She parked behind a sleek Mercedes she didn't recognize and stepped out, the gravel crunching under her sneakers. The air smelled of cut grass and old money, a scent that once comforted her but now turned her stomach. Through the front window, she glimpsed movement. Her father, Jim Carter, gesturing sharply. Her mother, Linda, nodding with that practiced smile. And 2 others. Ethan Brooks, Sarah's golden boy ex, and a wiry man in a gray suit she didn't know. Something was wrong, very wrong. Emily slipped through the side door, her heart pounding as she crept toward the sunroom. Voices spilled out low and urgent. "If she doesn't end it by next week, we'll cut her out completely," Jim said, his baritone cutting through the hum of the air conditioner. "The trust fund, the inheritance, everything goes to Sarah." Linda's voice followed, smooth as silk. "It's for her own good, Jim. She's throwing her life away on that boy." Emily froze, her breath catching in her throat. She pressed herself against the wall, peering through the crack in the door. Ethan Brooks lounged in an armchair, his blonde hair catching the sunlight, while the gray-suited man, Tom Sullivan, the family lawyer, she realized, scribbled notes on a legal pad. "I've drafted the amendment," Tom said, tapping his pen. "1 week or she's out, but we'll need leverage to make her see reason." "Leverage?" Ethan smirked, swirling a glass of bourbon. "You mean that report on Tran? State school dropout with a shady past. Perfect ammo." Emily's blood ran cold. Report? Shady past? Her mind raced to Mike's quiet demeanor, his reluctance to talk about college beyond vague mentions of coding and scholarships. What had they dug up? She edged closer, her sneakers silent on the hardwood, and spotted a folder on the coffee table. The label read Michael Tran, Confidential. Before she could think, Jim's voice sharpened. "He's a liability, Linda. I had a PI tail him for weeks. The kid's got skeletons, hacking allegations from his sophomore year. No charges, but enough smoke to suggest fire." Linda sighed, adjusting her pearl necklace. If only she'd chosen someone like Ethan. Sarah's smarter. She knows what's at stake. Emily's knees buckled. Hacking? Mike? The man who spent hours tweaking algorithms to help her design smarter buildings, who laughed at her terrible coffee and kissed her forehead when she was stressed? Was he a criminal in their eyes? She stumbled back, her shoulder brushing a vase. It wobbled, and she caught it just before it crashed, but the voices stopped. "What was that?" Ethan asked, his head snapping toward the hall. She bolted, clutching the folder she'd swiped in a blind panic, and made it to her car before anyone could follow. Her hands shook as she flipped it open on the passenger seat. Grainy photos of a younger Mike stared back, awkward in a hoodie, hunched over a laptop in a dorm room. A typed report followed. Suspected involvement in unauthorized access to TechCorp servers, 2014. Case dropped due to lack of evidence. Subject withdrawn from university shortly after. No conviction, no proof, just whispers and shadows. The drive home blurred into a haze of rage and confusion. She stormed into her condo where Mike sat on the couch, his laptop glowing with lines of code. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, slamming the folder onto the coffee table. His eyes widened, then darkened as he scanned the pages. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice low, almost pleading. "From my parents, who've been spying on you." Emily's voice broke, tears stinging her eyes. "Hacking Mike? You told me you left school because of money, not because you were some delinquent. What else are you hiding?" He stood, reaching for her, but she stepped back. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you everything. There are things. I was scared you'd look at me differently." "Scared?" She snapped, her chest heaving. "They canceled my engagement party because of you. Because they think you're trash. And now I don't even know who you are." Mike's face crumpled, his hands falling to his sides. "I'm the same person who loves you," he said softly. "But if you don't trust me, maybe they're right." The words hung between them like a guillotine. Emily turned away, her vision blurring with tears, and stormed out, the folder still burning a hole in her thoughts. She walked the streets of downtown Cincinnati, the neon lights reflecting off the Ohio River in jagged streaks. Her parents had declared war. Not just on Mike, but on her entire life. Cutting her out of the will? Fine. She'd never wanted their money, but digging into Mike's past, painting him as a villain, that was a betrayal she couldn't stomach. Her phone rang. Linda's number flashing on the screen. She answered, her voice ice cold. "What now?" Linda's tone was syrupy, manipulative. "Emily, darling, you still have a chance to fix this. Come home, let's talk. Don't let a boy like Mike drag you down." Emily laughed bitterly. "You mean a boy you've been stalking? I'm done talking." She hung up, her hands trembling as she shoved the phone into her pocket. Back at her condo, Mike was gone, his laptop closed on the table. A note lay beside it. "I'll give you space. I'm sorry." Emily sank onto the couch, the silence deafening. The folder stared back at her, its secrets clawing at her mind. Was Mike a liar? A criminal? or just a man caught in her family's crosshairs? And Sarah, her sorry felt hollow now, a crumb tossed to a starving sister. What couldn't she say? As midnight ticked closer, Emily knew one thing. She wouldn't let her parents win. But first, she needed answers. From Mike, from Sarah, from the shadows they all seemed to hide in. The fight was just beginning. Emily Parker woke to a gray Cincinnati dawn, the weight of the previous night pressing down like a stone on her chest. Mike's note, "I'll give you space, I'm sorry," lay crumpled on the coffee table, its edges curling as if ashamed of itself. She hadn't slept. Her mind a battlefield of doubt and fury. The folder her parents had compiled on Mike Tran sat untouched, its secrets whispering accusations she wasn't ready to face. She wanted to trust him, to believe the man she loved wasn't the shadow her family painted. But how could she, when he'd vanished into silence? The day unraveled like a nightmare. At her small architectural firm, the air buzzed with tension, thicker than the summer humidity. Her boss, a wiry woman named Claire, called her into the office, her face tight with strain. "We lost the Mill Creek project," Claire said, her voice clipped. "The community center for the kids, it's gone. The client pulled out this morning." Emily's stomach dropped. "What? That's been my life for 2 years. Why?" Claire hesitated, then slid a memo across the desk. "Word got around that your dad's pulling strings. They think you're a liability, Emily. A rich girl, playing a rebel, who'll thank us when the family calls." Emily's knees buckled. She gripped the chair, her nails digging into the worn leather. Jim Carter, her own father, hadn't just canceled her engagement party. He'd reached into her world and ripped it apart. The Mill Creek project wasn't just a job. It was her heart, poured into blueprints, classrooms for kids who'd never had a chance, a library with windows to let the light in. She'd fought for it, stayed late sketching under flickering lamps, all to prove she didn't need the Carter name. Now it was ash, and her colleagues' sideways glances cut deeper than any words. They didn't see Emily Parker, architect. They saw a spoiled heiress who'd brought a curse. She stumbled out of the office, the city blurring through tears. Her phone buzzed, Sarah Parker's name flashing like a warning. Emily answered, her voice raw. "What do you want?" Sarah's reply came shaky, punctuated by stifled sobs. I'm so sorry. Dad and Mom, they're pushing me to talk you out of this. They promised to pay my law school tuition, give me a spot at Carter Properties if I get you to dump Mike. I told them no, but..." She broke off, crying harder. "I don't have a choice. You don't get it. I'm not like you. I can't just walk away." Emily's chest tightened, a mix of pity and rage boiling over. "No choice? Sarah, they're destroying me, and you're bargaining with them? What happened to sorry?" Sarah sniffled. "I tried, I swear, but Dad said, if I don't help, they'll cut me off too. I'm not strong like you." The line went dead, leaving Emily staring at the screen, her sister's words echoing like a betrayal sealed in blood. Even Sarah, her last tether to the family, was slipping away. She wandered home in a daze, the Ohio River glinting dully under a slate sky. Her condo felt hollow without Mike's quiet presence, his laptop gone, his coffee mug cold in the sink. She sank onto the couch, twisting the engagement ring he'd made her, its tiny circuit pattern glinting in the dim light. She'd chased him out last night, her anger a wildfire she couldn't control. Now she wondered if she'd pushed away the one person who'd ever truly seen her. Then came the night that broke her. Around midnight, restless and desperate for answers, she grabbed Mike's spare laptop. He'd left it behind in his haste. The screen flickered to life and a notification pinged. A half-deleted email sent at 1:47 a.m. "Meet me at the docks, 2 a.m. Don't let her know." Her pulse raced. The docks, down by the river, a gritty stretch of warehouses and shadows. Who was he meeting? Why the secrecy? She stared at the words, her imagination spinning dark webs. Another woman, a deal gone wrong, the hacking past her parents had unearthed. She waited, pacing the condo, the clock ticking past 3 a.m., then 4. At 5:17, the door creaked open. Mike stepped in, his dark hair disheveled, his eyes bloodshot and sunken. He froze when he saw her, the laptop glowing accusingly on the table. He started, but she cut him off, her voice trembling with fury and fear. Where were you? Who were you with? Don't lie to me. Not now, not after everything. He sank onto a chair, rubbing his face with shaking hands. I can't tell you, not yet. I'm trying to protect you. Protect me, she shouted, tears spilling over. From what? My family's already taken everything, my job, my sister, my damn dignity, and now you're sneaking off to the docks like some criminal? Tell me the truth, Mike, or get out. His jaw tightened, pain flashing across his face. I'm not a criminal, he said quietly. But if you think I am, maybe I should go. He grabbed his jacket and left, the door slamming shut like a gunshot. Emily crumpled to the floor, sobs racking her body, as the ring slipped from her finger and rolled under the couch. She'd lost it all, her career in ruins, her family a nest of vipers, and Mike, the man she'd staked her future on, a stranger, slipping through her grasp. The email haunted her. Don't let her know. What was he hiding? Was it tied to the hacking, to her parents' vendetta, or something worse? Dawn crept through the blinds, painting the room in cold, unforgiving light. Emily pulled herself up, her eyes swollen but hardening with resolve. She couldn't let this break her, not yet. She'd go to Sarah's party at Riverside Terrace, face her parents, drag Mike with her if she had to. She needed answers, even if they tore her apart. But as she clutched the folder, its edges worn from her grip, a single thought gnawed at her. What if the truth was darker than she could bear? Emily Parker's hands trembled as she adjusted her jacket in the mirror, the reflection staring back at a stranger, pale, hollow-eyed, but resolute. The Riverside Terrace loomed in her mind like a battlefield, its elegance a cruel mockery of the night she'd lost. She'd spent the day pacing her condo, wrestling with the shards of her life, her career in tatters, Sarah's betrayal, and Mike Tran's midnight vanishing act. The email. Meet me at the docks, 2 a.m. Burned in her memory, a riddle she couldn't solve. But tonight, she'd face it all. She called Mike, her voice steeled despite the ache. Meet me at 6. We're going to Sarah's party. No excuses. He showed up at her door, his dark hair still mussed, his eyes wary but soft. Are you sure? He asked, his voice low. She nodded, shoving the folder of his past into her bag. I need answers. About you, about them. We're doing this together. He hesitated, then followed her to the car, the silence between them heavy with unspoken wounds. The drive to Riverside Terrace was a blur. Cincinnati's light streaking past like tears she refused to shed. The venue glowed against the night, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing the Ohio River in a shimmer of gold. Inside, chandeliers cast warm light over white linen tables, floral arrangements spilling over like excess wealth. Emily stepped through the doors, Mike at her side, and felt the air shift, eyes turning, whispers rippling. Linda Carter spotted her first, her practiced smile faltering before snapping back into place. Emily, darling, she said, gliding over in a navy dress that screamed money. What a surprise. And Mike, her voice dipped, a whisper meant to sting. This is a private family event, dear. I know, Emily shot back, her tone cold but steady. You made it clear where I stand. But Sarah's my sister, and I'm here for her. Linda's smile tightened, her eyes flicking to Mike like he was dirt on her shoe. How mature of you, she said, then turned to greet a guest, dismissing them with a flick of her wrist. Mike squeezed Emily's hand, his touch a lifeline in the storm. You okay? He murmured. I will be, she lied, her confidence fraying. The evening crawled by, a parade of slights and snubs. James Jim Carter barely glanced their way, his broad shoulders squared as he worked the room, shaking hands with Richard, Rick, Brooks. Ethan's father, and other power players. Ethan Brooks sat beside Sarah, his blonde hair gleaming, his arm bushing hers, too often for comfort. Sarah looked miserable, her eyes darting to Emily with a flicker of guilt before dropping away. Mike was invisible to them, served last at dinner, mistaken for staff by a tipsy guest who shoved an empty glass at him. Emily's chest burned, her resolve hardening with every insult. Then the room shifted. A tall man in a crisp suit strode in, his silver hair catching the light. William Bill Hayes, CEO of Pinnacle Tech. Heads turned, murmurs rising, but Bill's eyes locked on Mike. He crossed the floor in long strides, his voice booming. "Mike Tran? You're here?" Mike stiffened beside her, his hand tightening around hers. "Bill?" he said, his tone cautious. Bill's laugh was sharp, incredulous. "The guy who turned me down 3 years ago because he wouldn't let his tech fall into hands like..." He paused, his gaze cutting to Jim Carter. "Like yours, Jim." The room hushed, a pin-drop silence swallowing the clink of glasses. Emily's heart raced. "What's he talking about?" she whispered. Mike's jaw clenched, but Bill answered, his voice ringing out. "This kid built BioPredict, an algorithm that predicts health crises, saves lives. I offered him a fortune to sell it to Pinnacle, but he said no. Said he'd never work with vultures like Carter Properties, who'd use it to jack up hospital rents and screw the poor." Bill grinned, slapping Mike's shoulder. "Guess what? He finished it. Sold it to us last night. $175 million, with most of it earmarked for free clinics. Signed the deal at the docks, didn't you?" Emily's world tilted. The docks, the email. Mike turned to her, his eyes brimming with tears. "That's where I was," he said, his voice breaking. "I couldn't tell you, not until it was done. I knew your dad would come after you if he found out. I wanted you safe, and I wanted you to be proud." She stared at him, her throat closing as the pieces clicked. His secrecy, his exhaustion, his sacrifice. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she threw her arms around him, sobbing into his shoulder as the room spun. Chaos erupted. Sarah stood, her chair scraping back, tears streaming down her face. "Dad, is that true?" she shouted, her voice raw. "You'd turn Mike's work into something dirty? I'm not your pawn. I won't be." She grabbed Tyler Evans's hand, her boyfriend ignored all night, and stormed toward the door. Jim's face went slack, his champagne flute trembling. "Sarah, wait," he started, but she was gone. Linda clutched her pearls, her composure cracking as guests whispered furiously. Emily pulled back from Mike, wiping her eyes, and faced her father. She yanked the folder from her bag, ripping it open. "You hired a PI to smear him," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "Here's your proof. Emails, photos, lies about hacking. You didn't care who he was, just what he wasn't." She tossed it onto the table, pages scattering like confetti. "I'm done with you. All of you." Jim stepped forward, his voice low. "Emily, let's talk." "No," she cut him off, taking Mike's hand. "You chose money over me. We're leaving." They walked out, the riverside's golden glow fading behind them, the night air sharp against her wet cheeks. Mike squeezed her hand, his voice soft. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you." She shook her head, a sob catching in her throat. "You're enough. You've always been enough." As they drove away, the truth settled. Painful, beautiful, and hers to claim, but the fight wasn't over, not yet. The week after the Riverside Terrace showdown stretched like a lifetime. Each day, a fragile thread Emily Parker wove into something new. The echoes of that night. Mike's tearful confession, Sarah's rebellion, her parents' stunned silence, clung to her like smoke she couldn't shake. She'd walked away from her family, her heels clicking, definitely on the polished floor, Mike's hand warm in hers, but the victory felt hollow, shadowed by loss. Her condo, once a sanctuary, now echoed with the absence of everything she'd known. Her job gone, her sister a ghost, her parents strangers, wearing familiar faces. Mike Tran stayed close, his quiet strength a lifeline through the wreckage. They barely spoke of the party, the weight of it too raw, but he filled the silence with small acts. Coffee brewed just how she liked it, her favorite playlist humming through the speakers. his arm around her as they watched the Ohio River glint under dusk. She'd forgiven him for the secrecy, his $175 million deal with Pinnacle Tech, a revelation that reframed every doubt. He wasn't hiding to hurt her. He'd been shielding her from the vipers she'd called family. Still, questions linger about his past, about the hacking rumors her father had wielded like a blade. She didn't ask. Not yet. By Thursday, Emily's resolve hardened. She couldn't let her parents' betrayal define her future. Or Mike's. "Let's throw our own party," she said over breakfast, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "Not the Riverside bullshit. Something real, for us." Mike looked up from his toast, his dark eyes searching hers. "You sure? After everything?" She nodded, a spark igniting. "They don't get to take this from me. We'll do it our way." She found a rooftop at Mill Creek Brewery, a scrappy spot downtown with string lights and a view of the city's jagged skyline. No chandeliers, no floral excess, just weathered wood and open sky. She sent digital invites to friends who'd stuck by her, colleagues from her firm who'd apologized for their coldness, Mike's coder buddies, a few old college pals who'd never cared about her last name. She designed the invites herself, simple and bold. Emily and Mike engaged. Unbroken. The word unbroken felt like a promise she was still learning to believe. Saturday arrived, crisp and clear, the kind of day that begged for beginnings. Emily stood on the rooftop as the sun dipped low, her jeans and sweater a quiet rebellion against the dresses her mother would have forced on her. Mike wore his usual plain button-down and faded jeans, the same outfit he'd worn when they'd met. Guests trickled in, their laughter a balm to her bruised heart. No one mistook Mike for staff here. They clapped him on the back, marveling at his bio-predict deal, their voices warm with awe. As twilight painted the sky in streaks of orange and purple, Mike took her hand and led her to a makeshift stage, a plank of wood propped on crates. A projector flickered to life behind him, casting an image onto a white sheet, a blueprint of a low, sprawling building with wide windows and a sign reading, "Emily's Hope." He turned to the crowd, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "This is what the Pinnacle money's for," he said. "A free clinic, hospitals for people who can't pay, starting right here in Cincinnati. Emily's the reason it's happening. She's why I didn't give up." The crowd hushed, then erupted in cheers, glasses clinking as tears stung Emily's eyes. She stepped forward, her throat tight. "I lost a lot this week," she said, her voice breaking but strong. "My family, my job, things I thought defined me. But I found something better. People who believe in what's good, not what's shiny. This," she gestured to the blueprint, to Mike, to the faces around her. "This is my family now." Her gaze locked with his, and she saw tears glisten in his eyes too. Mike dropped to one knee, not to propose again, but to take her hands, his voice raw. "You're my reason, Em. I built this for the world, but I finished it for you." She pulled him up, burying her face in his chest as sobs shook her, the crowd's applause a distant roar. It was joy and grief tangled together. Joy for what they'd built, grief for what she'd lost. She'd traded the Parker name for something truer, but the ache of her parents' rejection cut deep. As the party wound down, Sarah appeared at the rooftop's edge, Tyler Evans beside her. Her sister's eyes were red, her law school blazer swapped for a hoodie. "Em," she said, her voice small. "I couldn't stay with them, not after what Dad did. I told him I'm out. Tyler and I were figuring it out." Emily started, torn between relief and wariness. "You mean it?" she asked. Sarah nodded, stepping closer. "I'm sorry, I wasn't brave sooner." They hugged, tentative but real, a fragile bridge over a chasm of hurt. Later, alone with Mike, Emily checked her phone. A text from Jim Carter glowed on the screen. "I was wrong, can we meet?" She stared at it, her finger hovering over the reply button, then set the phone down. "Maybe someday," she whispered, leaning into Mike. He kissed her forehead, his breath warm against her skin. "We've got time," he said. The night ended with stars piercing the dark, the brewery's lights twinkling below. Emily's hope wasn't just a clinic, it was a vow. A light born from ashes. She'd lost a family of blood, but found one of choice, and that was enough. For now.